Imagine the following. Dressed as a woman, I solemnly declare... I promise that I will do my best to be true to myself and develop my beliefs to serve the Queen and my community, to help other people, and to keep the guide law as a guide leader. Now, I've adapted the guiding code to make myself leader, and now, despite only self-identifying as a female, I'm good to go to take a bunch of girls aged 7 and above on trips where I'll help supervise their sleeping, showering and toilet routines. Unbelievable, isn't it? And when it became a major safeguarding concern for 2 leaders, they were expelled by girl guiding, and it's possible their packs will close down. This group think that means all trans rights trump just about everything else is plain wrong. I'm all for support and for understanding, but these leaders are misguided in every sense of the word.
I was curious about how you were going to deal with this topic, because I know it requires extreme sensitivity, so
I'm always your man.
obviously you are the perfect candidate to raise it. This is a really difficult topic, because you're balancing rights on both sides. And on the one hand,
And safety, I would say.
am very concerned about the rights of trans people who have experienced huge discrimination. And I think this whole conversation about making it easier for them to be recognised in the gender they're transitioning into is that in the past, the experience of wanting to transition was very invasive and required all kinds of unreasonable things. On the other hand, I'm also highly conscious of the concerns of women worried about anyone who chooses to self-identify with no checks and balances, kind of walking into women's only spaces.
Yep.
And the government's consulting on this at the moment, and there have been a few things happening. For example, these outside ponds in Hampstead Heath where people go swimming, said that anyone who self-identified as a woman could go into the women's pool, and then they changed their minds because it meant that some women weren't comfortable swimming there anymore. So I think it's a really difficult issue. I think you've slightly simplified what's going on with guiding, because it's not just about guide leaders, it's about the children as well.
But it's about safeguarding, I thought.
It's about safeguarding. Safeguarding children is non-negotiable. It's the most important thing.
So if 2 women who do it, if they have safeguard, respectfully, they probably know more than you or I.
So, I agree, but I think if you look at what girl guiding is saying, they are saying that they didn't dismiss these women who raised concerns because they raised concerns, but because they were doing things on social media that were intimidating others, that they went public, you know, that they hadn't conducted it in line with their
Before I bring others
code.
in, and I know this is sometimes it's cheapens the argument, but I'll bring Phil in next, but you have a daughter.
I do.
Would you be happy with your daughter going off on some kind of girl guiding trip, should she become a girl guide, with a bloke who's self-identifying?
I would want to know that girl guiding have done proper safeguarding. Putting a group of girls with a man, somebody who is physically a man, without doing proper safeguarding would be a huge concern. So I would want to know, and that's why I think this is a conversation. I don't think we have all the answers. But I'm very suspicious of anyone who says this categorically is the situation. A trans person can never work with girls in a guiding context, or a trans child who was born a boy can never be part of girl guides. I think that we need to be open to the fact that this is the front line of a huge change in society, and we don't have the answers, but we need to be very sensitive.
Phil's championing at the bit.
This is a subject. I'm Mr. Confused, right, Mr. Confused on this one. It's a very complicated subject, but there's a few things that I've brought out of this. One is, you know, the safety and safeguarding of the kids has to be paramount and has to be at the forefront of every argument. It trumps any gender, all right, the safety of our kids, any time. We're dealing with a minority fringe type of person who's and it's always the minorities who've got the loudest voices, by the way, isn't it? You know what I mean? They're shouting and screaming, these trans... I'm going to say trans people because I don't really understand it fully myself, properly. But what I will say in regards to the 2 girls that lost their jobs, OK, is that they are in an organisation which runs itself on discipline, and if they found themselves falling outside of that discipline, then they had to jog on anyway, didn't they? They had to move on.
If they feel that there's a safeguarding concern, is it not their duty to make that...
They've flagged it up, they've had that... I think it was more a case... It wasn't for the safeguarding concern, it was from the way they conducted themselves on social media.
Lastly, in your old game, if you're supplied with rifles that don't fire properly, isn't the duty of a soldier to say... these rifles
that's something would get done about it, of course it would.
Isn't that your duty?
But I'm not going up against policy.
What, even though they're giving you guns that don't fire?
This isn't the case. We're talking about...
OK. I think sometimes employees have a duty. If they're worried about the safeguarding...
Yeah, they've said something. They have said something.
I don't know that they should
but they haven't fallen in line... The way I've understood this is they haven't fallen in line... So they've had to move on for going against the grain in that respect.
I just want to bring my girl guiding statement in, just because... Do you mind, Majid, just because we've been talking about what girl guiding do, just very quickly. Just to explain... very quickly what the girl guiding policy is, because they say if an adult self-identifies as a woman, then they're able to undertake all adult roles. Young trans members should be able to share accommodation with other young members if they wish. Members are entitled to use the facilities of the gender that they self-identify as. And it's not a requirement or best practice to tell parents that a trans person will be attending a residential event.
Very important we go to Majid, because you've got a statement as well.
So the Girl Guides have issued a statement, and they've said keeping girls, young women and our adult volunteers safe is our #1 priority. We're really proud of our robust safeguarding procedures, which apply to everyone and underpin everything volunteers and girls do in guiding. We are deeply saddened that anyone would suggest that we would knowingly put our young members at risk. As an organisation, we pride ourselves on caring for every individual. Simply being transgender does not make someone more of a safeguarding risk than any other person.
Where do you stand on this, Majid?
I think that, first of all, it's really important that we recognise that the debate does seem to get shut down very quickly. I'll give you one example of that. On the women's side, women who are concerned, and yes, it's very sensitive, there was a poster that went up, and the poster simply stated the dictionary definition of being a woman. It said woman, women, noun, adult, human, female. And there it is, right there. And what happened is that a person on Twitter complained. It was a doctor who's non-trans. He complained, and the company that put that up, Prime Site, apologised almost instantly, within hours, and they said that they promised to remove that poster because they didn't mean to offend. And so the debate has become too overly concerned with causing people offence and shutting down the natural concerns that some people may have. And all I'd say is that, actually looking at this policy, the Girl Guidelines have stated that when a person is 18 or over, it is unlawful to tell other people that they are trans unless that trans person has given you permission to do so, which makes sense on the face of it. What I would say, though, is if a parent is sending their female child to a girls-only Girl Guides and not knowing that there's a male-to-female trans person responsible for supervising their, say, showering and they're staying in tents, I'd say that that parent, if they then subsequently find out, that they would have a natural concern to say, hang on, we didn't know that was the case. And because it's saying it's illegal to actually, for understandable reasons, out somebody, how is the parent meant to know? And you're taking their choice away as well, and that's why this debate has to happen.
Rachel, I want to bring you in after we hear from the woman. Phil, you mentioned her. This is the former guide leader, Helen Watts, who in a way is the whistleblower. Let's hear what she said.
Despite no change in the law, membership of Girl Guiding is now based on the principle of self-identity. Boys who identify as girls are treated as any other girl when it comes to residentials. The trans girl, who still has the physical body of a boy and who the other girls may have known as a boy until recently, is entitled to use the same sleeping, changing and washing spaces as the other girls, if they choose, and the other girls are not given a choice.
I just need to clarify that Helen Watts and the other guide leader are saying that they were expelled due to blowing their cover or talking about safeguarding concerns as regards social media campaigns or whatever else. That is unclear. So just move on from that, and that is unknown. Were you a guide or a brownie?
No, I wasn't. But, I mean, I think we have to ask whether Girl Guiding is going to be allowed to call itself girl. I mean, after you're not allowed to put up a poster saying the definition, technical dictionary definition of what a woman is. How do we define girl as it now applies in Girl Guiding? It's not girls, it's just anyone who thinks they want to be.
It's a very complex, very sensitive issue. How do you steer a path through this, Rachel?
Well, I think that the principle I would apply is I don't like these sort of absolutist positions that institutions are taking, saying, you know, you cannot tell the children.
Why did you look at me when you said absolute?
I'd like to engage all-eye contact to see if anyone wants to join in afterwards. It's called hosting.
Imagine my daughter, let's say, on a camping trip in the Brecon Beacons, and she is not told that actually the person who is looking after her is a trans woman, i.e. is physically a man. Now, I'm prepared to accept that children are much more across this whole trans movement than we are, we oldsters. But I still think it's quite confusing for children as well as for oldies like me and Phil. And I think it's wrong that you can't say to children, I think they're much more understanding than maybe we are, by the way, Miss Jones used to be
was Mr.
Gareth Jones, but now she's Miss Jones,
Yeah.
and it's all fine. And then I think everyone can understand it.
What I don't understand with this as well is if you go back to that statement I read out from the girl guiding, and they say that simply being transgender does not make someone more of a safeguarding risk than any other person. That's true, but the same sentence could be said about boys and men. Simply being male doesn't make you more at risk of being a problem for safeguarding if you were to apply that logic, because what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And these people have still, one imagines if they're self-identifying, they still have biological male organs. And so what I'm asking and what I'm wondering is, if that is the case, then what's the purpose of separate sex organisations in the first place? If you're going to take that line, you might as well merge them, which of course leads to other concerns that other people have.
Mums and dads would be happy with that.
I just want to tell you what Stonewall says, because that's the charity for LGBTQI people who've got a strong position on this, and they say no child should face discrimination or bullying simply because of who they are. Refusing to include trans young people can have serious consequences for their safety and well-being and is also breaking the law. It's really important that active steps are taken to create inclusive environments for all lesbian, gay, bi and trans people. I think in this debate we're focusing on the adult leaders, and I totally understand that, and this is a story about an adult leader who has left the guides and is very unhappy about the situation, but this is also about the children, and that creates a real dilemma, because if you've got girl guides, you've got trans girls who want to be part of that. Leaving them out and saying they don't count as girls is really, really problematic. But then, obviously, them sharing spaces and washing facilities and, you know, for both sides, they might be very self-conscious about their bodies being different from the other girls. So it's really difficult, but I think we should I just want to say, I think we've got to think about, these girls are very vulnerable. Trans girls, trans children are extremely vulnerable. Discrimination, being excluded, they later have mental health problems, they have high risks of suicide. It is very important to think, how can we get organisations like Girl Guides to include them?
I'm sorry to bring you down in your prime, right? But seriously, I think the way I'd leave this whole conversation is, so long as the safety of the kids is paramount and foremost in everybody's thing, then include as many people as you like, but just make sure those kids are safe, is what I'm saying.
Coming up after the break. So I've come into the city to speak to a fella who deals with veterans on a daily basis. In fact, he employs loads of them.